Hello and welcome to Rise and Unwind. My name is Dan. You know, each and every week I try to talk to people from across the country about things you could do in your neighborhood. And on this week's show, we got this.
That this is a story kind of from the inside out. It's a story where we really kind of understand what Paul was dealing with and how he was dealing with it. You see an insecurity in Paul that I don't think you really see publicly.
So we worked very closely with her parents to make sure that we could just bring her voice kind of front and center, and that she could at least be a part of telling this story from the inside out. So we interview her friends as well, quite comprehensively, so that we can hear this story from the 16-year-old perspective, including Skyler herself.
Adventure Valley is a competitive tournament-style video game where players actually learn financial skills through gameplay.
We're coming off the costliest 5-year period in natural catastrophe losses in U.S. history. $522 billion in natural catastrophe losses over the last 5 years.
I think my favorite is burns due to water skis on fire. That one is quite specific. And there's also one for struck by a turtle.
All of that plus more right here on that show we like to call Rise and Unwind. I like that. So what happens after you leave the biggest band in music history? For Paul McCartney, the end of the Beatles wasn't the end of the story. It was the start of a whole new chapter. Man on the Run from Oscar-winning director Morgan Neville takes us inside Paul's post-Beatles years, the launch of Wings, and a deeply personal decade that shaped his solo legacy. Morgan joins us today to talk about the film Paul McCartney, Man on the Run, which is now available on Prime Video. Welcome to the show, Morgan. How are you?
I'm very good. Good talking to you.
All right. The Beatles breakup is one of the most talked about moments in music history. What did you discover about Paul during that immediate aftermath that might surprise some of the fans out there?
I mean, so much. I mean, if you watch Get Back, Peter Jackson's kind of 8-hour version of the Beatles at the end, making Let It Be, you see Paul is driving everything. Songs are pouring out of him. And the question is, what happens the day that disappears? And what happens is that Paul has a true heartbreak. I mean, he's the one that wanted the Beatles more than anybody. And, you know, he essentially is told by John Lennon that John wants a divorce from the band. And Paul, within 2 weeks, runs off to Scotland with his new wife, Linda, and their new baby, Mary, and tries to figure out what he's going to do. Is he even going to make music anymore? And so these next few years, he really struggles. And that's the part of the story I don't think people really understand, you know, and that whole life of him trying to figure out who he was if he wasn't a Beatle.
So what was that period for him, like creatively and personally, and him trying to find himself?
It was in some ways, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I mean, I think, you know, publicly, the public was angry that because they were heartbroken. So how dare you guys break up? Why can't you just be the Beatles? You know, what are you doing? And Paul's wife, Linda, takes a lot of flack for, you know, did she help break up the band? Same thing happened with John and Yoko. You know, there's just a lot of kind of anger, and the critics are saying, you know, your music isn't as good as what the Beatles were. You know, it was kind of an impossible shadow to escape, but that's Paul's mission. He has no choice but to try and escape it. So he tries and tries different things for years to kind of see who am I and what is my voice now as just Paul McCartney. And part of that then comes into fruition when he starts the band Wings. So it's the model he knows. I'm going to be in a band with some other people, and there's a camaraderie to it that makes me feel like I'm not alone. And through that, he finally starts doing albums like Band on the Run and becomes kind of more the Paul who we know today.
And we also get to see some rare archival footage and a little bit of intimate family photography from Linda McCartney. How did those elements help you tell a more vulnerable side of Paul's story?
I mean, there's incredible footage we found. I mean, there's footage of Paul filming himself alone, writing songs at a piano, or with the kids, you know, and the singing songs at Christmas time. You know, there is a real intimacy to the footage. And that's really the main thing I wanted to convey, that this is a story kind of from the inside out. It's a story where we really kind of understand what Paul was dealing with and how he was dealing with it. And you see an insecurity in Paul that I don't think you really see publicly.
So what do you think the story tells about resilience and reinvention?
I mean, I think it's a story, and Paul's story is how not to doubt your own creative instincts. I think, the world always wants you to doubt what you do and judge what you do. And I think Paul's strength at this time is, I'm going to do whatever the hell I feel like. And that's fine. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, fine. And he does some crazy things that work and things that don't work. He releases, Mary Had a Little Lamb as a 45, which, nobody particularly likes. But then he puts out Mull of Kintyre, which becomes the biggest selling single in England in history. So they're both kind of crazy ideas. But I think he was all about embracing the crazy idea at the time. So creatively, I think it's pretty inspirational.
And for some of the lifelong Beatle fans out there, or even some of the brand new fans that may just know Paul from today, what do you hope audiences may take away after watching Man on the Run?
I mean, I know because everybody tells me this, when you're done watching the film, you're going to go listen to a lot of music because there's a lot of music to explore. But also just an understanding that Paul's a real person dealing with real issues that are actually pretty relatable.
Morgan, I want to thank you for joining me today. Paul McCartney, Man on the Run, is available now on Prime Video. It's an intimate look at a music icon, redefining himself in real time, and it's a must-watch for any music fan. Morgan Neville, I want to thank you for joining me today.
Great talking to you.
Some stories don't fade with time, especially when they involve trust, friendship, and betrayal. The new 3-part Hulu docuseries, Friends Like These, The Murder of Skyler Neese, revisits the 2012 disappearance of a West Virginia teenager and the shocking truth that followed. It's a story told through social media, personal interviews, and voices closest to the case. So joining us this morning are director Claire Titley and former FBI agent and polygraph examiner Dr. Rob Ambrosini. Thank you two for being here. How are you?
Thank you. Good. Thank you.
All right, Claire, what stood out to you about this case and what made you feel like it needed to be revisited now, more than a decade later?
I think one of the things that made me that was so kind of shocking about this case when I first kind of looked at it was the fact that it's 2012 and it's quite a unique era in a way for social media, because it was that era where social media was new. It was kind of a new frontier. It was the kind of Wild West though as well. And teenagers were experimenting with it. They were just putting their entire lives online. They didn't have the hindsight that we have now about kind of, what could possibly go wrong. But also it was an era where adults weren't really looking at social media. So nobody was kind of checking up on them. There were no sort of checks and balances. And that makes that generation of teenagers at that kind of time particularly unique. They're almost like the guinea pigs of social media.
And the series used Skyler's own words and social media posts that you said. How did that storytelling change the ways this story unfolds for viewers? I
think it was really important to us to try and give Skyler a voice. We didn't want her to just be a kind of a plot point in a true crime, where she's just the kind of victim and has no voice. We really wanted her to have agency in telling her own story, which is harder than it sounds, obviously when she's gone. But she left behind this incredible sort of archive of tweets, of digital messages, but also her own writing as well. So we worked very closely with her parents to make sure that we could just bring her voice kind of front and center, and that she could at least be a part of telling this story from the inside out. So we interview her friends as well, quite comprehensively, so that we can hear this story from the 16-year-old perspective, including Skyler herself.
And Dr. Ambrosini, you spent 24 years with the FBI. You've conducted thousands of polygraph exams. When you look at this case, what role did interviewing and behavioral analysis play in getting the truth?
Well, interviewing really played a significant role. And long before I became involved in the case, the two young girls, they were interviewed by case agents, state troopers, local police investigators. And during that process, you kind of started seeing this evolution of what really should be fact, right? When things are fact, it doesn't change, right? The truth is the truth, and it's always going to be the truth. But there were indications during these interviews that really did result in kind of like this evolution of their story. And of course, when that happens, the logical investigation is, why is this person changing that story, right? So this case is kind of about the behavior that's exhibited, the ideation, what's going on, what are they thinking, and how are they communicating? And that really speaks to the social media that you have here, which again was kind of in its infancy stage, if you will, compared to what it is now. So really, a lot of it did come down to the really significant interviews that the investigators were doing.
And one of the most unsettling aspects is how normal these friendships appeared on the surface. How does this case reveal about the hidden conflict, especially among teenagers?
I think what we really wanted to do with this series was kind of remind people what it's like to be 16. It's very easy to forget when you become an adult, and put that behind you. But about the fact that when you are that age, your brain behaves in such a way that your friends become much more important than your parents, than your family. Everything is very heightened. Your reasoning is off, if you like. Your idea of consequences, is very different to that of an adult's. And when you have that combined with social media that is completely I say unregulated, but unwatched by anybody else, that's where the kind of combination was kind of so dangerous, really, I think, particularly for that generation who didn't have the hindsight that we have now.
And Claire, after someone watches all 3 episodes, what do you hope stays with them?
I hope people do reflect on their own use of sort of social media on their children, on their family as well, and remember what it's like to be that age. But also, I hope that they come away from this feeling like they know Skyler, and she would have turned 30 just a few weeks ago. So that's a life that she didn't have. And she should have gone to college. She wanted to be a lawyer. There's all this life that didn't happen. And I'd love for people to come away knowing and remembering Skyler as she was.
Hey, I want to thank you two for joining me today. Friends Like These, The Murder of Skyler Neese, with all 3 episodes available to stream now on Hulu. I want to thank you two for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Financial stress isn't just a personal issue anymore. It's showing up at work in a real way. A lot of people are feeling it, and it's starting to impact focus, attendance, even performance. Geoff Howard is the CEO of the Money Confidence Project, and he's been working with some companies to help employees get a better handle on their finances. Welcome to the show, Geoff. Thank you for being here, my friend.
Dan, thank you for inviting me today. And this is especially important because this is Financial Literacy Month.
Well, happy Financial Literacy Month to you. I'm sorry I didn't get you anything. I was practicing my financial literacy. And for people hearing about it for the first time, what is the Money Confidence Project and what are you trying to solve?
So Money Confidence Project, we're a nonprofit that's focused on taking the anxiety out of money. The good news, Dan, is that there's plenty of content, resources, and tools out there that actually teach us about money. But despite all of the tools and content that's out there, people still feel anxious about money. So we asked ourselves, why is that? And what is it that we can do to help people become more confident with money? And just as important, how do we help people build healthy financial habits? So Money Confidence Project, we accomplish this through our suite of programs that actually take the human side of money into consideration, which recognizes, Dan, that each of us has our own money relationship with money, and that those relationships may be different.
So you've built out a range of programs. What does that actually look like for employees day to day?
We have a suite of programs and something for everyone. All of our programs use the power of entertainment to get at this human side of money that I mentioned earlier. But first of all, we have Million Stories. Million Stories is our entertainment channel that has bite-sized content that focuses on real stories from real people about their relationships with money. Then we have Venture Valley. Venture Valley is a competitive tournament-style video game where players actually learn financial skills through gameplay. And finally, we have Groove. Groove is a personal finance app that identifies a user's unique money personality and then adapts to that. And Groove was actually developed with help from researchers at Duke University's Common Sense Lab. So it's actually created and includes sound behavioral science.
And you mentioned this is showing up in the workplace. How does financial stress translate into a real business impact?
Basically, financial stress is a productivity issue for employers. More than 50%, Dan, of employees have indicated that they experience financial stress and that financial stress is impacting their work. And nearly 50% of employees have indicated that they've missed work due to this. And Dan, the impact of this is staggering. It's estimated that U.S. employers lose $250 billion a year in productivity due to employee financial stress. So it's for this reason that we encourage all employers to adopt some form of financial wellness programs for their employees.
So if a company is watching and they're thinking, we need this, what does it look like to bring your team in?
Well, we offer license and sponsorship opportunities for all of our programs. For example, an employer could license Groove from us and offer that to their employees as part of their employee benefits package. And because we're a nonprofit, we actually take the revenue that we receive from our licenses and from these sponsorships and reinvest those back into our organization so that we can continue to develop our programs and continue to do the good work that we're already doing.
And for anyone who wants to learn more or get involved, where should they go?
Well, Dan, people can learn more about us, our programs, and more importantly, how to partner with us at moneyconfidenceproject.org. It's important to point out that our entire distribution model is based on partnerships. And we see these partnerships as the mechanism that we can use to fulfill our mission.
Geoff Howard, I really want to thank you for joining me today.
Dan, thank you for having me.
Kind of feels like every bill is going up right now, and insurance is right there on the top of that list. A lot of people are seeing higher costs for home and auto coverage, and it's not always clear why. Today, we're getting some answers on what's behind those increases and what actually helps. We're joined by David Sampson, President and CEO of the American Property Casualty Insurance Association. Welcome to the show, David. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me on, Dan.
Okay, so what are some of the biggest factors driving those insurance costs up right now?
The biggest factor is inflation. Inflation spiked in 2022 to 9%. That's the highest level in 40 years, and it's increased the cost of everything. You see it when you go to the grocery store or the gas station or childcare. It certainly impacted insurance rates as well. The second factor is increased severe weather. And the third is fraud and lawsuit abuse. All of those are the major drivers behind increasing insurance premiums.
Okay, so what are insurers doing to try to improve affordability for homeowners and drivers?
Well, the first thing is to invest in mitigation and resilience. We're doing a lot of research as an industry on fortified homes. Florida leads the way in terms of building codes for hurricane-resistant structures, and it has really improved the losses in Florida when hurricanes do in fact hit. The second thing that we're doing is focusing on fraud and legal system abuse. And again, Florida really leads the nation in that regard. You know, Florida a few years ago had the highest insurance premiums in the country, homeowners insurance premiums in the country. And then the Florida legislature passed comprehensive legal abuse reform in 23 and 24. And in 2025, Florida actually had the lowest insurance premium increases of any state in the country. And legal system abuse is a real driver for insurance losses, and everybody pays for those nuclear verdicts that you see advertised by billboard lawyers and on TVs. And Florida is making really significant improvements in reducing lawsuit abuse and fraud.
Okay, we hear a lot about disasters, inflation, and you mentioned legal costs. How do those actually impact what people are paying?
Well, when you think about inflation, for example, the cost to repair homes, both in terms of construction materials and labor, has increased dramatically over the last 5 years. Automobile prices have increased dramatically. The cost of new cars has increased dramatically, but also the repairing cars when they're in an accident. Auto parts and auto labor has been dramatically impacted by inflation. And then the severe weather. We're coming off the costliest 5-year period in natural catastrophe losses in U.S. history. $522 billion in natural catastrophe losses over the last 5 years. And all of those factors drive insurance premiums. Insurance is just a pass-through industry. Whatever it costs us to repair and replace homes or automobiles gets factored into the price of insurance premiums.
And for somebody at home, how could they evaluate their own risk and make sure they're properly covered without overpaying?
The most important thing that people can do is to consult their local insurance agent or your company on a regular basis. We recommend at least every couple of years do a comprehensive checkup on your insurance policy to make sure that you're not under insured, which is a real problem in its own right as home values rise, but also look for ways to improve your premium by perhaps increasing your deductibles. If you have the savings available to do that, that can significantly reduce your premium, or by bundling your home and auto coverage. Many companies offer discounts for bundling your insurance. And your local insurance agent can help you do that evaluation every couple of years, and then shop around to make sure that you're getting the best coverage at the best price.
So from your opinion, are there any policy changes or reforms that could help stabilize prices or improve coverage options?
Well, as I mentioned, the biggest policy change is dealing with fraud and legal system abuse. And Florida has led the way in that, and it's had a significant impact on reducing premiums in Florida already. The number of lawsuits have dropped significantly since the Florida legislature passed that comprehensive reform, and you're now seeing other states following Florida's model. Georgia passed reforms very similar to Florida's this past year. Louisiana is embarking on legal system abuse reform. New York, the governor of New York this year has proposed comprehensive legal abuse reforms, especially with regard to auto accidents or auto coverage because of fraud and staged accidents in the state of New York. So that's the biggest single thing that state governments can do to improve the insurance environment.
All right, so where can people go if they want to learn more and maybe take a closer look at their situation?
We recommend our website, apci.org/insurance, which has all of these tips, and people can dive deeper. But then again, as I recommend, contact your local insurance agent and ask them about what they can do to improve your coverage and your premiums.
David A. Sampson, I want to thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Dan.
Do you ever hear something so specific and wonder, who needed that to exist? Like a medical code for a knitting injury, or getting hit by an orca. Turns out there are tens of thousands of these codes, and they play a big role in how your care gets billed and recorded. Joakim Edin is an AI researcher at Cordy, and he's here to break down what these codes mean and why getting them right actually matters. Welcome to the show, Joakim. How are you?
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fine, man. You know, these codes, I was going through the list, and it made me laugh and wonder how some of these came about. So for people hearing this for the first time, what exactly is medical coding, and why are there so many of these codes?
Yeah, so every time you see a healthcare professional, someone would read through all your medical documentation and then assign these medical codes. And a medical code is essentially a label that represents your diagnosis or the procedures that were performed on you during your visit. And these are then directly translated into costs, so that's what ends up coming on your bill. And then also they're used for healthcare data, like statistics. So in the US, there are 72,000 different diagnosis codes. And they're super specific because you want to capture all possible ways people get injured or sick so that you can find like different relationship and try to prevent people from getting hurt.
I know I gave out a couple of medical codes that I found interesting. What are a few that stood out to you?
I think my favorite is burns due to water skis on fire. That one is quite specific. And there's also one for struck by a turtle. So there was 2,000 years ago, there was a guy called, I can't pronounce his name, but I think it's like Achilles. And an eagle was flying above him and mistook his head, his bald head, for a rock, and then dropped a turtle on his head, killing him. I think maybe in Florida, it's more common that it's like you have snapper turtles, right? That bites people. So that would be like struck by a turtle. And then you have problems with parents-in-law is also a code.
You know in How I Met Your Mother, they say, wherever there's a sign, there's a story. But I guess when there's a hospital code, there's also a story. That's one thing that we learned today. When a code is wrong, what does that actually mean for a patient on the other end?
Yeah, so in the US, 12% of all claims are denied. And in most of the cases, it's because of the medical coding is wrong. So essentially when medical codes are wrong, the insurance company would often refuse to pay for the bill, and then you end up with it. Another problem is that the healthcare statistics end up being wrong, and that misleads research and policymakers. And finally, like a medical code will follow you for the rest of your life, and that can influence your career. So imagine you being a pilot, and then you accidentally get a depression code. So then people won't let you fly anymore.
So Cordy is using AI to help with this. What does it look like in practice?
So we have created an AI model called Symphony for medical coding. And essentially what it does, it will read through the medical documentation, and then it will suggest medical codes for the human doing the coding to help them do it like faster and more accurate. And we recently released a white paper showing that we're up to 25% more accurate than our competitors like OpenAI and Anthropic.
And if people want to learn more, where should they go?
They can find more information at www.cordy.ai. There you can try our AI model and play around with it for free. And you can also read our white paper where we explain how the AI works and show you the comparison of different methods. And also you can find a report we wrote called Struck by Duck, where we look into these like bizarre codes and the story they tell about each country. For example, in England, there was a problem of people walking with their phone and walking into lampposts. So you can see that in the coding. And in London, they started putting on padding on lampposts to prevent people from getting hurt.
Joakim, changing people's lives with medical coding. I want to thank you for joining me, my friend.
Thank you for letting me come.
And that is it for Rise and Unwind. I want to thank you for tuning in and checking out the show. If you actually want to be on the show, email us. Go to our website. That's riseunwindtv.com. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. You can say hi there and check out some of the behind the scenes. Plus, follow our YouTube channel. That is at Rise Unwind. And until next week, we are that show we like to call Rise and Unwind.